First, we have to even look, what does value even mean, right? Because we use the word all the time, but value is really, it can be defined as the relative worth or desirability of something to the end user or beholder, right? What is it that makes it so worthy of such value that that other person will willingly exchange their money for it and be glad they did?
Yeah.
And so to do this, we need to be able to ask questions
Mhm.
and listen. And this is why I believe introverts have such a natural advantage over extroverts when it comes to the selling process.
Hello and welcome to the Art of Value Whispering podcast. I'm your host, Melitta Campbell, business coach, value whisperer, and advocate for introverted female experts who want to build a business that feels natural, authentic, and impactful. Over the summer here on the show, I'm hosting the Brilliant Business Book Festival, where I'm speaking with the authors of some of my favorite business books and of those books that I wish I'd read sooner. And today's guest is the legendary Bob Burg, author of Endless Referrals and the co-author of the best-selling book, The Go-Giver. Now, this book is one of my favorites, and not only because it's brilliantly written as a story, but also because its message is simple, yet transformational. When you focus on creating real value for others, success flows naturally. Now, that has always been my personal belief and a theme that's central to value whispering, but it's also a message that I've been doubtful of from time to time, particularly in the early days of Facebook groups and YouTube gurus, when the message often seemed to focus more on putting prices up, selling to hundreds of people, and not giving away too much. So I was grateful to have a compelling, logical, and business-focused confirmation that you can absolutely give exceptional value first and build a successful business. I was a bit nervous going into this conversation as a longtime fan of Bob's work, but I enjoyed it so much. Bob was so generous and shared the surprising advantage introverts have in sales. We looked at how to build deep relationships rooted in trust and why receiving is just as important as giving. We also explored how to set healthy boundaries, avoid burnout, and how to stay true to your values as you build and grow a thriving business. So if you are ready to shift your mindset, amplify your impact, and communicate your true value, you are going to love this episode. And don't forget, head over to melittacamble.com/podcast to use the free AI coach that accompanies this episode. I've called her Valora, and she will help you turn the insights from this episode into practical actions you can take this week to grow your business and deepen your self-awareness and impact. Let's dive in. So welcome, Bob. It's wonderful to have you with us on the show.
Well, thank you. What an honor to be here, and congratulations on the new book. Very, very exciting.
Thank you. Thank you. We're just in the very final stages of the editing and pulling it all together, and it's getting very exciting. So your book, The Go-Giver, is one of those business books I keep going back to because firstly, it's just a real joy to read. It's written as a parable rather than a dry business book. So you kind of get to the end and you're like, oh, you almost don't realize you're learning so much because the storytelling is so beautiful and relatable all the way through. So it's always one that I come back to, and it's so aligned with value whispering. So I'm excited for our listeners to go out and get a copy of this book for themselves. And just this morning, I was speaking to someone in my network, and I was telling them we're going to be speaking this afternoon, and she's like, "Oh, I have to show you something." And she went and got her copy of The Go-Giver, and it was just like yellow pages, all thumbed through. And she said, "It's my all-time favorite book." She was, "I can't tell you how many times I've read it." So
Please express my thanks. It's very nice. It's a real honor to hear something like that.
yeah, it's great. So as I said, it's written as a parable rather than a business book. And I was really curious why you chose that way of doing it. And was that easier or harder, or what was the experience like?
Well, so My first major book, which came out in the 90s, that's how long I've been around. It was called Endless Referrals. And the subtitle was Network Your Everyday Contacts into Sales. And it was a how-to book. And it was really written for entrepreneurs and sales professionals who they knew they had a fantastic product or service that brought lots of value to their customers and clients, but they didn't necessarily feel comfortable or confident going out into their local communities and developing the kinds of relationships where people would want to do business with them directly and or refer them to others. So it was my relationship building system, if you will. It was based on a premise that all things being equal, people will do business with and refer business to those people they know, like, and trust. And it was sort of my system for developing those relationships. I define a system simply as the process of predictably achieving a goal based on a logical and specific set of how to principles, the key being predictability. If it's been proven that by doing A, you'll get the desired result, then you know all you need to do is A and continue to do A, and you'll get the desired result of B. So it was a how-to book, and it fortunately did very well. At the same time, I'd always loved, since I'd been in sales, I'd always loved reading business parables. And the reason is because parables are stories.
Yeah.
And stories, by their very nature, connect with people on a more heart-to-heart level. And there were so many wonderful business parables that I have personally benefited from reading. But anyway, I'm not a parable writer. I'm a how-to writer. And so it was something where I thought, gee, wouldn't it be a great idea to take the basic premise of Endless Referrals, turn it into a parable? But I just kind of sat on the idea for, a number of years. Until the early 2000s, I was writing a monthly column for a sales magazine, and the editor-in-chief was a guy named John David Mann. Now, John is, even back then, had an absolutely wonderful reputation as a writer, as a storyteller, he was also a fantastic, very successful entrepreneur in his own right, and a great guy. And so as we kind of developed a relationship over maybe about a year or so, and it was really funny because, whenever he would edit an article of mine, he'd send it back to me, and it was always very humble. I changed this, I put this here, I did. Now, as you know, as a writer, they don't have to really do that. They usually just leave half your stuff on the cutting room floor and do what they want, right? But he never did that. He was always but his writing was so great. And so our kind of ongoing joke was I'd write him back saying, well, John, not only is this okay, because he'd always ask, is this okay? So not only is it okay, you write my stuff better than I write my stuff. And so, so we just had a great relationship. And so I'd been writing down these sketchy ideas about this book, The Go Giver, but really had nothing and finally I just asked him, I said, would you be interested in exploring the idea of co-authoring a business parable where we took, some of the basic ideas from Endless Referrals, but it would be more than that. And well, he was busy at the time, he doing a whole lot of things, but he asked his back then fiance, now his wife of, I think, 15 years, Anna, he said, I don't really have time to do this, but it's Bob. It's like, I know him, like him, and trust him. How can I just say no without, at least exploring it? So he and Anna were visiting her mom on the other side of Florida, the Gulf Coast. I live on the ocean side. And they took a 4-hour drive one afternoon. We had about a 3-hour dinner, and the three of us discussed, what the book would kind of be like, what we envisioned for it. They left and it was about 3 weeks later, I got a call from John. He said, we discussed this. We think it's a good idea. Let's do this. And I'm thinking, yeah, this is good, because I knew John. John was the storyteller, the writer, the guy who made this thing happen. And so in answer to your question, was it easier or more difficult to write? It was very easy for me because, John was the lead. And so, while we went back and forth on everything and discussed everything line by line, John was the guy that made this happen. And so that wasn't so it took about 3 months to put it all together. The most difficult part was getting it sold to a publishing house, because our agent, great agent, she's wonderful, but she was shopping it around New York for the publishing houses. We were rejected 24 times.
Wow.
Yeah, before the 25th one said yes. So it took 3 months to write it and a year to get it actually accepted.
It's hard to imagine now, knowing just how successful it is and what an incredible difference it's made in the world. It's
Oh, thank
amazing
you.
to hear that it was rejected 24 times, but then encouraging as well,
Oh, sure.
Really?
Well, it's sales.
Yeah.
You're communicating an idea to somebody who doesn't yet know that it's something that would be of value to them.
Mhm.
And it's like what you teach. You've got to be able to communicate a message in such a way that the other person, in this case, a publishing house, but it could be a single prospect, it could be a company, understands why it would benefit them to
Yes.
take the idea seriously and implement it if that's, in their best interest to do so.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's why it's so important always to understand your value in the context of the other person.
Yeah,
It's,
you just nailed it. That is the key. It's not just first we have to even look, what does value even mean, right? Because we use the word all the time, but we have to, value is really, it can be defined as the relative worth or desirability of a thing, of something to the end user or beholder, right? What is it about this thing, this product, service, concept, idea, counsel, coaching, whatever it happens to be? What is it that makes it so worthwhile, so worthy of such value that that other person will willingly exchange their money for it and be glad they did?
yeah.
Because there was so much value in it while you make a very healthy profit. So, yeah, so you look at the relative worth, which means what? Value is always in the eyes of the beholder. It's not what we think is of value about what we do, as important as that is. That's not what does it. It's how does that other person understand this value? And so to do this, we need to be able to ask questions
Mhm.
and listen. And this is why I believe introverts have such a natural advantage over extroverts when it comes to the selling process. Because and I say we, most people don't realize that I'm an introvert. They think because I get on stage and spit that I'm an extrovert. No, two different things. Okay. And so we tend to not really want to talk about ourselves as much as ask people questions about themselves
Yeah.
and then listen. And that's such a key. That's such an advantage.
Yeah, absolutely. And my first book was A Shy Girl's Guide to Networking. And that was really
Mm.
the idea behind that. It's like,
Yeah.
stop trying to network like the extroverts. You have something even more powerful.
Yes.
You can,
Yes.
yeah. And on the podcast, we've been talking about sales recently, making that point exactly because we like to listen, ask questions, and reflect before
Hmm.
we
Hmm.
answer. These are amazing sales skills. So yeah,
Yeah. Oh, those are, yeah, they're the most important.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So in the book, it's really a parable about Joe, and he, as Donald Miller might say, he meets a guide who's Pindar. I was curious if you've had a Pindar in your life that helped you to learn some of these lessons, or has it been more life that has given you this gift?
Uh, I have been very fortunate that while in business, I never had, first of all, I was very lucky to have great life mentors and my parents. So very fortunate. And I know John came from great parenting as well. So that was a total advantage in terms of life mentors, right? But as far as business goes, I never had one mentor that took me from beginning to all the way through. But I was very lucky that I always seemed to find mentors when I needed them as I went along, right? At whatever stage I was at. Now, I always tried to make sure to provide value to them as best I could. And sometimes providing value to a mentor just means you're a good student and you listen and you thank them and you're filled with gratitude. But it also might mean you go out of your way to do things where they may have a certain weakness and you are able to help them with that in some way that may be totally, off the chart. For example, it might be that you have great technical skills. And this person who's mentoring you, you see something on their website that doesn't reflect as well on them as they could, but you know how to kind of navigate and work within that and everything. And you let them know, I'd love to just as a way of saying thank you to you, I'd love to, to help you maybe redo your website a little bit. It could anything like that. We find ways to add value. Or it might be that that this person is a collector of books on old, Roman wars or something like that, right? And so you go out where you find an old copy, a treasured copy of something that's hard to find, and you do things however you can to express gratitude so that they know you don't take their mentoring for granted.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can definitely find mentors along the way. There doesn't have to be one specific person.
Yeah. And I have a lot of secret mentors like yourself. In reading your book, you
Oh,
became one
thank
of
you.
my secret mentors.
Oh, thank you.
But I totally agree. And I've been really fortunate to have some phenomenal mentors throughout my career as well. And partly it has been that I've helped them out first. So I was a student and he was like the number one PR guru in the UK at the time. He was working for like some incredible celebrities. And I was having a conversation with him and he was just really frustrated. He's like, have you ever heard of PowerPoint? I was like, oh, yes, I use it every day. I love PowerPoint. And I was like, can I help you? So I helped him with his PowerPoint, did his presentation for a big talk he
That's
was.
a perfect example. Yeah,
Yeah. And then he was able to help me, which was amazing. But I
perfect
think
example. Yeah.
also when you're looking for a mentor, they want to know that you're going to do something with any knowledge and support. You have to be a bit of a go-getter, which brings me to my next question,
Okay. Sure.
which is like the difference between a go-giver and a go-getter, because is it just about giving and then hoping something will come back, or do you actually need to get intentional, or do they kind of marry up together?
Yeah, let's talk about that. That's so very important. So, people do ask because of the title, right? The go-giver. So are you and John saying that being a go-getter is now a bad thing, an undesirable thing? Absolutely not. We love go-getters because go-getters get things done. They take action, right? And as you can have the best ideas, the nicest thoughts, the greatest of intent, but without action put into the mix, absolutely nothing's going to happen. It simply cannot happen, right? So no, we say be a go-getter, a person of action, and a go-giver, a person who is absolutely totally focused on bringing immense value to others. So what we would say is actually be a go-getter and a go-giver. Don't be a go-taker. A go-taker, right? That's the opposite of a go-giver. A go-taker, that's the person who feels entitled, if you will, to take without having added value to the person, to the process, to the situation. And go takers tend to generally be very frustrated because they rarely attain the kind of success financially that they feel they deserve. And even when they do, and they do sometimes, it tends to be both short-lived, um, but even if not, because there are some go takers that achieve, financial success and they sustain it. But boy, is it tougher. It's a lot more difficult because you're really on your own. You don't have, what we call personal walking ambassadors. You don't have, as Richard Wildman would call them, delighted advocates for you and your business. You have to just keep repeating the same thing over and over. So no, we say be a go-getter and a go-giver. It's just understanding what they really mean. Okay. Person of action and a go-giver is not someone who is a martyr, right? Just give. And it's just understanding that to the degree you take your focus off yourself and place it on others, well, that's the degree you're going to develop those know, like, and trust relationships and have people wanting to do business with you. It's also, and you ask another great question, say, is it just a matter of, waiting until good things are? No, not at all. Even receptivity, which is the fifth, law, receptivity, the key to effective giving is to stay open to receiving. You still have to ask for the order usually. You still have to ask for the referral. Now, don't get me wrong. There are times, no, the business will just come to you, but I wouldn't bank on that as a way of, as a principle for building your business. No, human nature is such that generally speaking, you need to ask for the order. You need to ask for the call to action. You need to ask for the referral. The key is, have you built the relationship so that person feels so good about you, they want to be a part of your life, a part of your business? Do they want to do business with you? Do they want to refer you to others?
Yeah. And as you say, when they want to support you, then the ask becomes easier
Of
and
course,
everything
absolutely.
becomes easier. Nobody really succeeds on their own. And I think we've all experienced at one point or another a go taker, and it doesn't feel good. When you come across these people and they ask for something and you perhaps give it, and then they keep asking or expecting
Mhm.
more, or sometimes even get grumpy that you didn't give them enough. when you really put yourself out to help them, yeah, it doesn't feel good. And I know for all of my listeners that they're definitely not in that camp. They want to do good. And that brings me to my next question, which you've already touched on. As I say, all my listeners are really big-hearted people. They want to help other people. So this
Mhm.
idea of giving, I don't think it's a problem. But giving to the detriment of their own success, I think can be a challenge, putting boundaries around that giving. Do you have any advice on how to know where the limit is, or is there a limit?
So let's definitely communicate a very important premise, and that is that there is nothing about being a go giver that is congruent with being anybody's doormat or a martyr or self sacrificial in any way. Okay. And, what I suggest to people is if there's a pattern of being taken advantage of, and I'm not saying every so often, once in a while, anybody is going to, if you, unless you just don't ever talk to anybody or deal with anybody, that's the only way to never be taken advantage of, but you're also not going to accomplish anything. So, I mean, there's going to be some time in your life it's going to happen. Okay. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about someone who is in a pattern of being taken advantage of constantly and consistently. If that's the case, it is happening to you not because you're a giver, not because you're a nice, good hearted person. It's happening because you are creating the environment for being taken advantage of. Now, this is never conscious. Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, "Hey, I wonder who I can get to take advantage of me." Okay, no, it's always unconscious.
Yeah.
And there are a variety of reasons. Okay. It could be a matter of self-worth. You don't feel as though you're worthy of not being taken advantage. I'm not saying that's the case. I'm just saying there's lots of reasons. Okay. It could be you don't have the tools to really know and to be able to understand, who is this and who is that. It might be that unconsciously it's an excuse for not accomplishing your goals. Oh, well, I'd be able to if only people didn't take advantage of me. Or it might be a call for attention. Oh, that's the person who's so nice, but she's always being taken advantage. Again, I'm not saying any of that is true for anyone listening or watching. I'm saying there are reasons, and it's always unconscious. So the first thing is, if you say to yourself, you're listening to this and you say, well, yeah, there's a pattern of my being taken advantage of constantly. What I'm going to say is congratulations, because you're living in reality and you are acknowledging this. We can never overcome a problem that we're not aware of or that we don't acknowledge. Okay. Now, should this be something that you see as something you need to work on, you need to get assistance with this. It might be through, coaching from you. It might be through somebody else they know. It might be through a counselor. It might be through going deep and deciding what is it that's causing me to feel as though I need to be the one taken advantage of
Yeah.
throughout. There's no natural relationship between being a go-giver and being taken advantage of. Now, how do you know who the person is? Well, first of all, you don't really know. We can never know, but we can spot patterns in people. Okay, to talk about patterns. Now, let's use patterns in a different way. So we know that this person tends to be a taker. Okay, do they do this with others? Is this something I've heard about them? Is there some way I can find out without gossiping, of course, but still find out what is this person like? What is his or her reputation? What are other people's experiences? Or what have I noticed? You can look for things, you can look for signs. And I usually, if someone does something, once that is kind of not exactly what I would like to see, that could be a one off. You know, they do it twice. Okay, now I'm going to pay attention a little bit more. They do it three times. It's probably a pattern.
Yeah.
You also, want to make sure that you don't put yourself in a position where you can be burned. Okay. And so again, you need to kind of watch out. But what we find is the more you become a go giver, the more you're going to attract other go givers into your life.
Yeah.
And you're going to be dealing with people who are. Now, let's say you find out someone isn't. Let's say you discover someone's a go taker. Do you have to keep doing business with them? No, there's no reason to. You know what we say, you lovingly release them, right? But always with kindness. It just means you don't necessarily do things with them. But can I bring up one other point?
Yes, of course.
Sometimes we might think someone's a go taker when we haven't done a good enough job of communicating our needs.
Mm.
So let's say there's the person who you have referred business to, okay, because you know they do a good job, you've heard they do a good job, so forth, so on. But it's been a year and they've never referred anyone back to you, and they certainly could. You have the kind of business where they could. Well, it might be they're a go taker, but it might be they don't know that you want the business. They don't know how to know who would be a good customer for you. You think they do because, well, of course, everybody knows what I do and who would be a good, but we don't know that. We don't know what that other person's thinking, right? And so it might be a matter of getting together with them, speaking with them, and just saying, I've really enjoyed being able to refer business to you because I know you do a wonderful job. I'm wondering, I'm always open to, always expanding my referral-based business. And I'm wondering how comfortable you feel referring business to me. And they might say something like, oh, well, something, I didn't think of it, or I didn't know really that that's what you wanted. I always see you're so busy and everything. I didn't want to bother you. Again, you just don't know.
Yeah.
And so we can never know what another person's thinking, right? Because it's always based really on our belief system, our unconscious set of beliefs. And so we need to be able to ask, and then we can always decide.
That's so true. And, we should never assume, or I always like to assume positive intent. And
Hmm.
as you say, very often people don't know that they can or how or that that's what we want. And so,
Exactly.
which brings me to the fifth law, and you've
Hmm.
already touched on it, the law of
Receptivity, yeah. So
activity.
important. Yeah.
I can never say that word.
It's a tough word to say.
And I think this is in the book you mentioned, like says that that's the hardest one. And I think particularly for big-hearted entrepreneurs, giving, as I said, no problem, but then
Right.
receiving and asking is
Hmm.
quite difficult.
Hmm.
Is that something that improves with time when you start asking and then it becomes more of a habit and easier? Or is there anything in particular people can do to help with that?
It improves and gets easier if there's not an underlying issue stopping it from happening. Okay. So again, why do people have issues with receiving when they're very comfortable with giving? Well, what is the message that the world around us gives us about receiving? Oh, it's better to give than it is to receive.
Yeah.
As Pindar says in the book, well, think about it. It's almost impossible to give without receiving, because when you give, it's like planting and harvesting, sowing and reaping. Just the act of the giving starts the receiving, but we've got to be open to it, for it to happen. Okay. Now, so why aren't we open? Well, because the world tells us not to be open in many ways. So are you a righteous giving person, or are you a greedy receiving person right? And so that we see this all the time. Now, this is, again, it's part of that unconscious set of beliefs, which is based on upbringing, environment, schooling, news media, television shows, movies, popular culture, cultural mores, certainly social media. We see it. It's everywhere. You would think that anyone who does well in business did it on the backs of others, or did it through nefarious means. Now, it's a big world. There's people who do things in ways we certainly don't agree. But by and large, unless someone is forced to do business with you, and they're probably not, okay? I know with me, no one's forced, no one has to do business with me. The same with you and probably everybody, right? Unless someone's forced to do business with us, the only way that we can profit financially, that we can thrive, is by providing value to them in such a way that they choose to buy, right?
I
And
guess
so,
it's the difference between receiving and taking.
oh, sure, sure. Well, you take from someone by force or by fraud, you take from them. When you receive, it's part of the act of their giving, and you are receiving. But again, you've earned that giving.
Yeah.
You've earned that giving. So here's my suggestion, that again, we go into, asking ourselves the question, do I have a pattern of sabotaging situations
Mm.
when I could be receiving, let's say, a lot of money or kindness, or, what have you? Do I push it away? Do I find some way for it not to happen? And if so, why? What is it in my thinking? What are my premises? What are the false premises that I'm associating with earning a lot of money? Right. And this is where prosperity thinking, prosperity mindset comes in. And my feeling is, even though, yeah, we covered that on a surface level in the Go Giver, yeah, again, it's a parable. You can't really go deep into it. Fortunately, there are a lot of great teachers out there. People like Randy Gage, people like Sharon Lecter, people like Lisa, Leisa Peterson, people like Ellen Rogan, who specializes in working with women on prosperity consciousness. She was a financial advisor, but then she came to realize the problem wasn't teaching women how to invest, it was teaching them how to have the mindset of being able to receive.
Yeah.
Right. Now, and again, this is not just a woman thing. I'm just saying that Ellen, she's special. That is her focus. Okay. You got people like David Nagel, the late Bob Proctor, Ken Honda from Japan. You've got these wonderful, fantastic teachers on prosperity mindset. So my feeling is look those people up and start studying them. Read their blogs, watch their videos, take their courses if they have them, and so forth. And you'll notice that 99.9% of what they teach is simply how to get past the blocks that keep you from prosperity.
Yeah. And we've got Mike Michalowicz coming on this.
Oh, well, Mike, yeah, and Mike is just, what he did with the profit first system is just game changing.
Yeah.
And again, it's so funny because when he first came out with the book, people looked at the title and said, Profit first. Are you saying profit before people? No, of course, that's not what he's saying. He's saying profit first in terms of making sure you pay yourself,
Yes.
because otherwise you're not going to have a business to be able to serve people and so forth. So yeah, Mike's great. He's one of my heroes.
Yeah.
And so yeah, so all these people are just fantastic to learn from.
Yeah. I have one final question for you. So when I wrote my book, A Shy Girl's Guide to Networking, I then got asked to speak a lot about networking. And that's when I started to see the questions people had. And I'm very tempted now to write a second edition, updating it with like answering those questions. But then there's a couple that came up time and time again that I think that could be a whole chapter that I'll add in. Since publishing it, because I know you've spoken a lot about Go Giving over the years, is there anything you'd be tempted to put into a second edition if you were to do one?
Well, we did follow up books to the Go Giver. So for example, we came out with Go Givers Sell More, which is the follow-up book to the Go Giver. It's the only one in the series that's not a parable. So in that, we answered a lot of the questions people had and shared a lot of success stories of people who, after reading the Go Giver, they applied this and this is how, but also a lot of people who, long before they ever read the Go Giver, were conducting their business that way and they were very successful. So we shared a whole lot of stories about simply how this works. Then we had the Go Giver leader and then the Go Giver influencer. So we took sort of the basic principles and said, okay, how would a leader apply these? How would an influence? And then John and Anna actually wrote a fifth book in the series, a fourth parable called The Go-Giver Marriage. So yeah, I think what we did is we answered questions with different books. So I love the idea of you updating,
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for this conversation. And just, as I say, just the most wonderful book. If people want to know more, you've got your website, burg.com, which is Burge. Is that the best place for them to go to?
Yeah. And while they're there, they can subscribe if they'd like to my daily impact email, which I send out Monday through Friday.
And you have the Go Giver Alliance as well, which is a wonderful community too.
Oh, thank you.
Bob, thank you so much.
Oh, my absolute pleasure. And again, wishing you much success with the release of the new one.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us today. I hope this conversation has left you feeling inspired and equipped to lead and grow your business with more purpose, generosity, and confidence. I loved Bob's message, and it's a powerful reminder that selling isn't about pushing, it's about connecting, listening, and offering meaningful value in a way that feels natural and true to you. If you have enjoyed this episode, do take a moment to share it with a friend or leave a review. It helps more business owners to discover how they too can grow their business with calm clarity and in a way that feels right for them. And remember to go and visit melittacampbell.com/podcast, where you'll find the show notes page for this episode and other episodes in the Brilliant Business Book Festival, where you can also access your free AI business coach, Valora, who will help you turn the insights from this episode into practical actions that you can take this week to grow your business. I will be back here again next Wednesday with another author interview, so I look forward to seeing you then. Meantime, keep whispering your value with confidence.